I'm Arlene Mulder, the Managing Director of Direwolf, where we focus on protecting the practice. Today we have an extremely exciting topic to talk about: cybersecurity and what is happening in the industry. What are we seeing? Some interesting facts. With me today, I'm very excited to welcome Ryan van der Coolwijk. He is the Head of Product of Cyber Insurance for iToo. Ryan, welcome.
Thank you, Arlene. Lovely to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us. Tell me a little bit, how did you get into the space? What is your background? Cybersecurity, what made you do this?
So I actually started off my career in cybersecurity, as a lot of my generation did. I went and studied IT and then went and worked in the UK in development for a year. Came back, worked for a IT security company where I worked up to running their development team, then went and spent a bit of time consulting in the security sphere for one of the big audit firms. But really wanted to get a little bit more hands-on and a little bit more detailed. So when there was an opportunity to join a startup in the cyber insurance space, I jumped at the opportunity. That is a business that was then acquired by Hollard. And as part of that, I moved across to Holland and started the cyber insurance team there.
So tell me, there's a lot of noise about cyber at the moment. Some people feel like it's a new topic. Others have known about it for quite a while. But just roughly the last 10 years, what have we seen? What have been the developments? Is this something we should care about? Is it important?
So a couple of big themes that we've seen is, one, the sort of emergence of the digital economy. If you look at the way that businesses operate today as to how they did 10 years ago, so much has gone more online. We're using computers and data a lot more than we would have previously. There's massive benefits to it, so speed, efficiency, the ability to access volumes of information and processes that you couldn't in the past. Unfortunately, with that, there is a dependence that's been created on having access to that data, the systems processing that data, and also keeping that data safe and secure. What's transpired with that is we've seen cyber criminals have gone, oh, hang on a second, actually, to take a step back, not necessarily just cyber criminals in general going, here's an opportunity to conduct crime from the comfort of my own home, maybe sitting on a tropical island in my board shorts, as opposed to running around having people shooting at me. This is a great opportunity. And this whole emergence of cybercrime has arisen. I think one of the forms of crime that we've seen evolve dramatically over the course of the last 3 or 4 years, and is now the most rampant and causing the most sort of devastation, would be ransomware. So that's transitioned from a couple years ago where you'd get an email that was typically poorly crafted, claiming to be from a prince in some far-flung country. Please pay me this money into my bank account, or whatever the case is, to really well-crafted and sophisticated attacks. We now often see hackers breaking into environments, not just trying to sort of commit their crime via mail. And when they're in that company environment, first step, trying to see what all they can access, so actually scouting out the lay of the land, and then looking to encrypt the entire environment. With that, we saw a massive increase in the impact on a business, because now if they could encrypt both your production, all the sort of data you're working on a day-to-day basis, as well as your backups, companies were in an unenviable position where they had no information to recover from and had to very seriously look at paying these ransoms.
So if you could just break it down for us in simple terms. So if someone talks about a cyber attack, I think what people imagine is someone sitting behind the computer, logging in, taking away the access to data and demanding some Bitcoin as payment, as ransomware, or holding you ransom. But give us some practical examples. What do people actually do? So you say they're criminals. So normally, in maybe what we understand before, is someone comes and they steal something of value that they can then sell and make money from it. So what are these criminals actually after, and what are the basic things that they do?
So a range of things, and the guys are very, very smart in the way that they start to monetize the data and the access to environments you can get. We typically see as hackers gaining access to environment, and there's various ways they'll do that. It could be an initial email to elicit you to click on a link and go and fill in some details. We've seen a number of attacks where, unfortunately, Microsoft Office, which is now widely used, has been utilized by hackers. They'll send you a mail that looks exactly like it's come from Office and say, hey, click on here to go and enable a security feature, for example. People click on it, give their credentials, hackers will go and they'll take over that mailbox and then maybe ask for a change of bank account details just before a big transfer is about to go through.
Yes.
Or they'll use those credentials to log into a company environment, steal data from that company, hold them to ransom because it's sensitive data, say, hey, if you don't want us to release or publish this and you want to protect your reputation, you better pay us X, Y, and Z. Or they'll encrypt everything that they can and say, if you want access to your data again, pay us for this. What we've also seen, and there have been some high-profile incidents over time, is where hackers will flood an environment with all these sorts of connection requests, basically making the systems inaccessible and then demanding a ransom to stop that.
Yes.
What we've seen that's been, I suppose, a little bit more interesting and out of the norm is where we've seen a lot of staff perpetrating crime. So, for example, the receptionist who has access to all the information in the business and goes, I know why so-and-so was here and their wife wouldn't necessarily be happy about this, so I'm now going to extort money out of them not to release or publish this. We've seen where staff have held their own employers to ransom, various different things. What also needs to be looked at from a cyber perspective, and just taking a level above and maybe trying to simplify it, is look at anything which relates to a compromise of the privacy of data and the security of systems.
Yes.
And when you look at this privacy of data, all of a sudden you open up things like, oh, I've got data on a memory stick, or on my cell phone, or on my laptop. If that's lost or stolen, this is a breach of the privacy of that data. And now you start bringing things like POPI, etc. into the equation and having to make right on that.
So interesting. Okay, so tell us, what are the industries that you see most effective, or who do these cyber criminals normally go after?
So what's quite nice is we actually had one of our commonly used forensic sort of IT specialist response teams published a report over what they've seen over the last few years specific to the South African environment. I suppose working in the financial services industry, I shouldn't be proud to say financial services tops the list of those, but we're also seeing IT technology businesses, medical professionals being targeted, and the legal fraternity have also been in the sort of crosshairs, if you would.
And have you seen a pickup in attacks since COVID?
Very much so. Both from the number of attacks that we see, I think with moving remote, we've seen hackers targeting a lot of commonly used technologies. The fact that with staff working remote, it's harder to push the security patches and things down because internet where the person's working from might not be as good, so these big patches are difficult to get implemented. So hackers targeting those infrastructure or those commonly used technologies and then attacking those. We've also seen a big increase in the costs related to these attacks, in responding to these things. So the ransomware where the data is being copied out and you hold to ransom A not to release or publish that data and then to decrypt it has meant that we've got to get legal a lot more involved, notifying the information regulator from a POPI perspective, the PR elements trying to manage the potential reputational damage, notify the affected parties. On average, our average claim is now probably 4 times more expensive than it was 2 years ago.
Okay, so on that note, so you are in cybersecurity insurance. Why do we need insurance? What does this cover? So what are the costs? So I get hacked. So we've spoken about what everyone kind of thinks about is, okay, must I pay my 2 Bitcoin? But that's not the only thing. So that happens, but I guess you try to negotiate. You can give us advice there, but what does the insurance cover? What are the costs when you get hacked?
So what's nice with the cyber insurance policy is it's very broad in what it covers following the incident. It kicks off with the IT costs. So having IT experts come in to determine how do these guys get into your environment? How do we regain control? And while they were in here, have they created any backdoors so they can access the environment again? Did they steal any data? What have they done? How do we regain control and close that out?
And can you get your data back, perhaps?
All of these sorts of things, helping you recover systems, get everything up and running again, and really fantastic resources that we've got on that front. However, it is a scarce skill, a very specialist skill, and that means it does tend to cost quite a bit of money. You've also got the legal guys that will come in and guide you on what you need to do from a regulatory perspective. So from a South African perspective, we have POPI in place. If you have European citizen data, you've got the Global Data Protection Regulation, or GDPR, that you need to comply with. So you've got legal to walk you through and make sure that you don't end up in hot water on that.
Quickly tell me about fines. You can get fined, right?
Yes. So Specifically looking at Poppy carries a maximum fine or penalty of 10 million Rand or 10 years in jail. GDPR, which gets scarier, is the maximum of 4% of global turnover or 20 million euros. Back onto what you see, and these are costs that you're going to incur normally if you're responding. So, IT, we need to fix this. Legal, I have no idea what I'm doing. Help me draw something to the regulator. I don't want to be in trouble. PR, to look after your reputational damage. So, if you're all of a sudden splashed all over the front of the page of the news, spokesperson training. What do I say? Who do I say it to? When do I say it? Then the cost to communicate with those who have been impacted. So if you take, for example, a doctor or something, or the patient information is missing, Poppy now will require that they need to go and notify these individuals
in
of the
writing,
information.
right?
Well, there's various ways you can do it, either via a contact center, or properly crafted mail campaigns and stuff, because the postal system is not really going to assist you much on that front. As well as to provide them with what we call remediation services, so things like credit monitoring, etc., so that if somebody goes and tries to open up a line of credit in that person's name, they'll be notified and they can close it out at that point in time. So really the cost to look after those affected parties. Things which are required from a Poppy perspective to try and prevent that 10 million Rand fine.
Which makes it quite expensive as well, because you
Absolutely.
have to contact every single data record person that is affected.
And then provide them these remediation services like the credit monitoring for typically a period of 6 months to a year. We've also got the cyber extortion cover, and that's, as we've been talking about, now I've got this ransom demand. Do I pay my 2 Bitcoins? How do I do that? So the policy there would give you the cost to confirm the ransom demand. So if you've just received a comms to say, hey, I've stolen all this data, please pay me 2 Bitcoin, you're going to want some evidence of this before you even contemplate making that payment. So the policy provides you the specialist services to get that confirmation, to see if you can recover without paying the ransom. Because ideally, no one wants you paying the ransoms. You want to be able to recover. However, if you can't, then policies extend to provide the cost for the negotiators, who, it's also a special skill. It's kind of like a ransom hostage kind of kidnap negotiation you go through, and then the actual settlement of those demands as well. Hopping onto almost like a second pillar, if you would, is the business impact. So while you've had a cyber incident, often your IT environment is now disrupted, your business is suffering a loss of revenue because you're now down and busy recovering and getting things back up and running. So you've got that loss of revenue, the increased cost in getting you back up and running. The policy can extend to your Poppy fines and penalties where we are legally able to do so. And that's still a little bit of a grey area while we wait and see how the regulator is going to function. And then should it transpire that somebody comes to sue you, you've got cover for the legal defense and settlement of any litigation that could arise. And then just to sort of add 2 things onto that, so new developments we're starting to push out into our product is if somebody hacks into your environment and they can steal money from your bank account, it picks up that financial loss that you've incurred. And if they can cause damage, because we've got so many devices that are now connected to the internet, if they can damage those devices or property or something, it picks up the repair and replacement of those devices as well. So quite sort of comprehensive, but all things that companies typically do incur, unfortunately, following an incident.
Yes. So very interesting. So you mentioned doctors, for example. So anyone who has, because I think a lot of people out there think, but well, how do I know if I need this or not? Am I at risk? Because I think something like this that is quite scary, you tend to not even want to think about it. So who would you say are the people that actually need to be worried about this and need to put the cover in place? So obviously if you have lots of data records and businesses, but who would you say who are most at risk?
I suppose one of the things that excites me the most is you could argue that everyone is at risk. If you have IT systems and data, you have a cyber exposure. As you said, the industries and the sort of professions that are most at risk would be those that are heavily dependent on being able to access the system and data, or have vast amounts of the system and data and sensitive data. So doctors, great example, because they sit on all the medical records, which is super personal and sensitive. They need that information to be able to perform a diagnosis. Accountants sit on a lot of information. IT technology service providers often have access to different client environments as they provide them with support services. So here you've got, if somebody breaks into the IT provider and they can access their client environments from there, these guys might come and seek some form of restitution from them. So the policy would also pick up your sort of downstream exposures. Financial services, much like doctors, very sensitive information that sits on. That information can be used to commit fraud against individuals down the road. So these are all the sorts of professions that have it. We see a big uptick in manufacturing concerns. So they need to be up and running in order to generate funds. Hacker breaks in and shuts down the production line. The company's bleeding money, and you need to get up and running as quickly as you can to minimize that loss.
So tell me, what are some of the basic things? So I know there's a lot of things you can do to protect yourself a bit better, but if you can give just like 3 little tips for people to just reduce their risk.
First one, and it's what we see being compromised most often unfortunately, is passwords.
Yeah.
I know they're a bugbear. Nobody likes passwords, but it is critical to make sure that you're not leaving the keys in the front door or leaving the front door open. Mm-hmm. So try use more complex passwords. Try and move to passphrases. So instead of password 123, we see it happening all the time. Hackers know about password 123, guys. They're gonna get in. Go to a passphrase, and if you can, implement what they call multi-factor authentication.
Yes.
So this one-time pin to your phone, because hackers can't guess that. So that really gives you that first bit of protection.
So just to explain, so you'll have a password where you log in, and then perhaps on your phone you get a code. So it's a different device. So that just gives that extra level of protection.
And that code keeps on changing. So even if you've got a simpler password, the chances of the hacker getting that code in this 30-second window are impossible.
Interesting there's a lot of fraud in banking, but now, so FNB, for example, has a virtual card, and your CVV number changes every hour.
Amazing.
And that has significantly reduced the risk of fraud.
Absolutely, that's I didn't know about that. That's a fantastic solution. The other thing, and I know it sounds so basic again, is patching. So when there are Windows updates and updates for applications and stuff, it's a pain to have to restart and things. But those things are
up to date.
Absolutely.
Just keep it up to date.
They're there to secure the weaknesses that have been identified in that software. So it's really important to apply them as quickly as you can. And then the third one is vigilance. So if you have an email or a communication promising you something that seems too good to be true, or trying to create this sort of false sense of urgency, treat everything really skeptically.
I'll give you an example. One of my new employees, so obviously her Gmail was hacked where she got the offer to come work for us. And then someone sent, as if it was me, please go buy some Apple vouchers, iTunes vouchers, and WhatsApp me the codes. So luckily she didn't fall for it. But these are the kind of things that happen every day.
And
so just
trying to impress the
little bit, now she's a new employee, so don't worry, I'll never ask for something like that. But just be aware that these attacks happen all the time.
Absolutely.
So question, and look at the email address that it's from, because they changed the name, but just go that little step further.
And when it comes to links in a mail, rather go to Google, look up the company name, try to access things from there. Be really super skeptical of attachments, links in emails, in particular if it's not from somebody that you absolutely know and trust. And as you said, Arlene, take a look at the mail address that it's coming from.
It is quite scary because it feels like almost anything can happen. You could potentially lose your entire company. Just a quick one, how long do you normally see it takes to, so how long does the attack normally span? How quickly can you, obviously if you have the right IT people on board, but what is the duration of this sort of state of emergency in cyber normally?
Sure, so I'm actually going to answer the question in 2 parts. So one is, and it's a question I often get, is how long does it take the hackers to get in and, sort of before I know what's happening?
When do you actually find out? Maybe they've been in for weeks and you don't even know them.
That's the thing, yeah. So, often they can get in within sort of 5 to 10 minutes. And then they'll sit on your network for 2 weeks, copying data out, checking what you're doing, looking for an opportune moment to launch their attack. So we often see that in an environment on average sort of between 2 weeks and a month.
So if you have something like MDR, monitoring direct reporting, where someone monitors your device, would they immediately flag that someone is in?
There's a much better chance. So often these guys will be looking and correlating different activities and go, something doesn't feel right here. But you've got to have the right configurations and alerts set up, and you've got to have people monitoring on an ongoing basis. But it definitely improves your chances of picking it up and flagging it before something malicious happens. Then with the recovery, it typically depends on how complex the IT environment is, how long the guys were in, what they did. But for a relatively run-of-the-mill thing with the teams that we've got in place, they can typically have you up and running, sorted out within a day or two. So the teams are world-class, unbelievable.
That sounds good.
No, they blow my mind every time.
You don't want to be out for weeks or months.
No, definitely not.
But I guess if you don't have the right things in place, that could very well be a reality.
Well,
right?
what we've seen, and it's another sort of piece of advice I can give out, is rather spend the money on having the right guys in there, whether you've got insurance or not. We've seen a number of claims where guys have tried to kind of go at their own or got their local IT guy in to try and help, and they don't have the skills or the tools and stuff to look at that. You know, you're not going to get, you're not going to get your GP to perform open heart surgery on somebody, for example. So get the specialists in from the IT recovery perspective, because they can contain these things and get you back up and running faster. Often we've seen, you've used Joe's fish and chip shop to come and do your IT. They wrap up and you think you're back up running, 2 minutes later hackers are back and knock you over again. And you've just wasted that time.
They've left that back door
Absolutely,
open.
yeah.
Okay, well, that's been quite a lot. So if you can just summarize it for us, if there's 3 things that we need to remember, just 3 things to take away, what would you say?
So I think back to what we said we mentioned the 3 things to secure yourself, so I just want to just reiterate those, and then the other 3 things to take from the session. 1, passwords, multi-factor authentication, patching, and be absolutely vigilant and trust no one, as weird as that sounds. And then 3 things to take away. Guys, cybercrime is very, very real. South Africa, because we're at the bottom point of Africa, it doesn't mean that we are not impacted. It's one global network. We do have privacy legislation and stuff in place now. You can suffer the impact of these. So be looking after those.
It's real, it's happening.
The second one is get the right resources in to help you out if something happens. It might feel like you're paying a little bit more, but you'll definitely save money in the medium to long term. And then the third one is, I think, repeating one of the advices we give, just be absolutely skeptical and vigilant. That goes a long way to protecting you against cybercrime, which is real, but there's a lot you can do to look after yourself.
Thank you so much. Now, in all our episodes, we ask for a book recommendation. So do you have any books you could recommend for us?
So it's gonna sound like a weird one, but I think it's because it's one that I'm reading a fair bit at the moment. So I've got my little 1-year-old daughter at home, and have been reading to her quite often, Oh, the Places You'll Go by Dr. Seuss. And it's just like a message that I love to pass on to her, and something that she can carry through her life. So it sounds weird, it's not the most sort of intellectual, but it just sort of speaks to me as such.
I'm gonna have to buy it and put it on my bookshelf.
Cool.
Ryan, thank you so much. Thank you for joining us and learning more about the world of cybersecurity.